Canadian Cancer Survivor Network webinar. I'm excited. I'm excited that I had 100 people decide that this was very important. And in reflecting, you can make a huge difference in your health and in your happiness as well. And the science is now showing that. And I also just want to reflect on the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network because it's a wonderful name, talking about survivorship. More and more people who have a cancer diagnosis will be cured of their cancer, or they'll live for many, many years, decades, for instance. And so there's this opportunity to make a huge difference in your health and in your happiness and to really empower yourself. And so more and more, I think we have to think about the empowerment piece, going beyond getting the best care from the medical system. And the other word I really like here is network. The fact that you're tapped in, that you're learning from other people, from experts, you're sharing your stories, it actually has a very powerful effect because we are, as human beings, very social in nature. You actually tap into that brain chemistry and wiring when you connect with other people. So it's two ways that you can really make a difference in your health. What we're going to do today is talk about the kind of mind part of the body-mind connection. And you can see on the screen here the different healing techniques that I'm going to talk about today. First of all, just why would we be talking about the psychological well-being and the benefits? How does that have to do with the kind of cancer diagnosis? And what I've noticed is that people who have a cancer diagnosis have three major goals. One, they want to maximize their chance of cure, which makes sense, or their longevity. Secondly, which is really where this fits in, is they want to feel better. You know, having a cancer diagnosis can be tremendously stressful, and people want to kind of come back home to themselves, back to their emotional base and feel that sense of peace and well-being. And so that's a benefit. I think it's just an intrinsic value itself to feel happier and more positive. And the third thing, which taps into this one as well, and I've heard most recently, is that people want to be able to function better. They want their physical strength to return. They want their mental capacity, their effectiveness in the world. And so just from an intrinsic value, being happy will help out in all those aspects. Secondly, probably the number one stress that people worry about is the effect of their cancer diagnosis on their family members and friends. And so if you have that diagnosis and you can come to that more peaceful state, then you'll be modeling that and there'll be less stress in your family members. And in a sense, you can be an inspiration as to how you approach the situation. And the physical truth is that you can get through your treatments more easily when you settle down your stress reaction, able to fight off infections better. You'll have fewer complications and medical problems. And frankly, because you can live for decades, when you're in that happier, less stressed state, your body will be healthier, run into fewer problems, hypertension, stroke, heart, all the above. And lastly, like I said before, by taking care of yourself psychologically, your brain will actually function better. You'll be able to do what you love to do, to get out into the world and share your love and compassion with others. Does it influence survival? Probably yes, but it's just hard for me to say that from a kind of scientific perspective. What I can say is that the attributes of the remarkable survivors, the people who do exceptionally well in the dire situations, show that they do tap into these certain attitudes: acceptance, proactivity, authenticity. You know, so they do the psychological work, and it actually improves the kind of physical outcomes. So it's true. I just can't say it, you know, from a kind of scientific perspective. Okay, I want you to understand that what I'm talking about today is one slice of the larger pie in terms of complete cancer care, which is also called integrative medicine. So at the highest level is to have the understanding cancer, the diagnosis, the medical system, you know, be an expert in your own care, or if you don't want to do it, then have somebody else doing it. So that's the highest level. Next level is being able to advocate for yourself, get the best care from the medical system. That's a whole talk by itself, but again, it's an attitude that you're the most important person. The medical system is there to serve you. So next level is the body piece, that we are physical beings and that through our healthy habits we actually change the chemistry in which the cancer cells grew and actually can have an influence in many, many cancers. And now today's presentation is really around the level of mind. What can you do to work with a human brain, psyche, that will influence your happiness and health in the long term. And the last level I talk about is nurturing that kind of spiritual perspective that transcends the kind of body-mind side of it. I mean, it can have a very, very powerful influence on your health and happiness as well. But we're going to focus kind of at kind of brain psyche level for this presentation. Okay, so typically we think about the mind-body connection, what I think, what I believe has an influence on my physical body. But it's one system is the takeaway point from this slide, that your nervous system is not contained just to your skull, that the nervous system surrounds your gut and your heart, and there's lots of messages that are being sent up from the body to your brain. And it's another reason to take care of your body, because your psyche is influenced by the physicality of your body. I mean, the reason why you exercise has a huge influence on how the brain actually functions, for instance. I give the example of what do you do at 3 a.m.? You know, you're up there and suddenly you're awake and your mind's chattering and you're worrying, et cetera, et cetera. And what I do is to stay in bed, go through the boredom, keep the the lights off so I'm in darkness. I'm not suppressing the melatonin through 90 seconds or more of bright light. And I actually do a meditation technique, simply breathing. Actually, I had to do it last night as well. So breathing, settling down my mind, settling down my body. The body settles, and then the mind settles and helps. Exercise, 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 and meditation, I'd say, is the kind of key things. And the last thing is kind of a weird one, but I'm going to ask you to do that right now. I want you to kind of take on the power pose, which is to kind of lift your spine straight, lift your chest up a bit, put your hands on your hips, put your elbows outwards, kind of lift your kind of head towards the sky. And so we're kind of sitting up more straight, we're taking up space. This is the power pose. You can do this in the waiting room. It's kind of weird, or maybe in the doctor's office or before a big presentation or something like that. When you hold yourself in this position, standing up, taking up space, you actually increase the testosterone levels within your brain, you decrease the cortisol levels, which is the kind of stress levels, and that will give you a feeling of confidence, and you'll be able to function better going into that situation. So do that for 2 minutes at a time. You can go to YouTube, Google that kind of power pose and the science behind taking up space and empowering your body, which empowers your brain. Okay, you can relax back into your chair or where you're at. Okay, first topic, which I mean it's so common, is stress. And I just want to, first of all, normalize that we humans are going to have stressful events in our lives. And I'm not saying that we're just going to slap on a happy face here and just say, no, just be happy, don't worry, just be positive. So instead, I actually want to go to the reality of the situation. When we're in an unknown situation, when we don't know what's going to happen, we're going to feel stressed. And so I just want to recognize that and be able to work with that as the starting point here. Difficult things are going to happen in our lives. So outside of kind of the cancer diagnosis and not wanting that to happen, stress is associated with many positives. So people who have stressful lives also have very much more fulfilling lives. They're happier. Countries who have higher stress levels have greater levels of health, GDP, happiness within the population, et cetera, et cetera. In a sense, can reframe the stress as enhancing. It's enhancing. When you say that, oh, I'm feeling agitated, I'm feeling overwhelmed, you can say to yourself, well, my life is fuller, and I'm engaged, I'm doing something meaningful. And so that can actually improve your brain function by simply thinking that, believing that. And the other one that's very interesting here is that if I could teach you something, I could give you something over half an hour, and you changed your mindset, you'd actually have profound long-term benefits in terms of your psychological experience. So by changing your core belief around stress, you actually can have a tremendous improvement in your health. And I want to kind of try to prove that to you now. Now, yes, stress can be bad, and we don't want to be in this situation when the following 3 things are true. If you're feeling totally inadequate to a stressful situation, You know, if someone's super hurting and nothing you can do to help them, like if you're the family member or friend, yes, that's stressful because you're feeling inadequate. But for the most part, stress is kind of a self-induced thing. And if we can reframe it to say, well, I can learn from this, or, you know, I can look at this in a different way, I don't have to do everything, then you won't feel so inadequate. So usually we can reframe that. If it isolates you from others, all right, because we're so human, if our stressful event is, you know, we take it on ourselves without sharing and connecting, that can be adding to the stress. And lastly, if you feel like there's no meaning, you can't grow, there's no purpose, it's against your will, all the above. If you have all those, yes, I'll agree with you, stress is a bad thing. But typically, we can take a stressful situation and look at it from a bigger perspective. Even if you say to yourself, I can learn from this, I can grow from this difficult situation, I'll be stronger next time. Okay, so that creates a threat physiology, which is kind of the fight or flight type of feeling. And I wanted to share with you this next slide, which to me is a key slide. You can look at the classic, the lower black line here is the classic inverted U. And typically we think about stress in the kind of breakdown zone in the lower right-hand corner here. And yes, if you're there, if you're so stressed out, it is going to have a detriment in your health. And so we need to be able to recognize when we're really hurting badly and get ourselves back up into the kind of top part of the curve when we're functioning better. So that's one aspect, is to realize when you're really over the top, you need to get there. The second line, the top black line, is this idea of reframing that I'm going to go through. And so it gets a little confusing as to, you know, which situation you have to use the different techniques in, but I wanted to kind of introduce this slide so you'd have a feel for using different techniques in different situations. Okay, I want to thank, first of all, Dr. Rick Hansen. He wrote a couple of key books, many key books, but Buddha's Brain and Hardwiring Happiness. And, you know, really he's teaching, from me, the perspective of the brain is a product of evolution, and therefore we need to be able to look to see how the brain works and tap into that circuitry and use that circuitry for our benefit and the benefit of others. So hats off to Rick Hansen. So the brain is a product of evolution. Essentially, about 650 million years ago, the organisms became so sophisticated that there was multi-cells. You needed a nervous system, kind of a sensing unit that would send signals to the motor unit, which is essentially the nervous system. And then it became increasingly more complicated, like building a house starting on the ground floor and kind of putting the next floor on top of the previous floors. But even 2.5 million years ago, the human brain was sophisticated enough to make tools, and it was a third of the size of it that it is now. And that 2/3 growth created, you know, human beings that are much more social, living in tribes. For those of you who have green, blue, or hazel eyes, you're mutants, because really 6,000 years ago, there were only brown eyes. So evolution continues. And lastly, the successful tribes passed on their genetics to our generation, actually, to the humanity that works. So through competition of food and tribal warfare and, you know, really cooperation and love and connection and planning and social hierarchy and the sophisticated societies that came out of that. So we are the product of all that, and the majority of that's in our frontal lobe that it kind of supposedly, hopefully, oversees our behaviors. And so I've given a kind of a diagrammatic view here. So the reptilian brain is that kind of fight or flight, and then you have the limbic emotional system, the striatum, this approach system, and then that third neomammalian, and especially in the frontal lobe, the human side of our brain. So that's how it was built up over time. And you have those motivational systems, therefore, so the avoid harms, that kind of withdraw, it's the kind of takes precedence oftentimes. And then there's the approach system, essentially for sex or food. You wanted those species to you know, be proactive in pursuing it. And it's important to have those systems that you can tap into to pursue the important goals in your life. And lastly, the more human side of it is that kind of bonding, cooperation, executive function. But interestingly, those higher systems can tap into the circuitry of the lower system. So for instance, I'm showing you a diagram here, and you can think on the pain network on the left side. So for instance, if you say something embarrassing in a social circumstance, the same circuitry that feels physical pain lights up, for instance, or on the reward side, you get a promotion and you get the kind of pleasure feeling from that. So we have this kind of circuitry that we can tap into and be aware of. And simply being mindful of the expression connects the frontal lobe wiring to any of those other sections. So as you practice mindfulness, as you practice meditation, you're actually able to dampen down the more primitive aspects of your brain and then be able to choose wisely. So this is kind of what I've been teaching for many, many years. You kind of have the stressor, the situation, the worry, physical, psychological, etc. And then the perception, whether the tiger's in a cage or in Siberia, it gives actual physical response, the physiological adrenaline, cortisol, in addition to the change in how your brain actually functions. So those two things are the kind of classic fright scenario. And I didn't understand why it was that if I had almost wiped out on my bicycle, gave me the same kind of stress reaction as if I was kind of nervous going into a public talk. Why is it I'm feeling that same kind of sense of jitter and so on? And it's because the brain is using the same pathways. So whether it's a real threat to your life, like jumping away from a car that's coming at you, or you're worrying about what the next set of CAT scan or results are, you're going to have that same kind of jittery worry about your life. And then there's the social threats. If you're ostracized in the Serengeti, hundreds of thousands of years ago, that was as good as a death sentence. And you probably, if you were ostracized, you wouldn't pass on your genes. Whereas if you're quite concerned about how people perceive, you within the social group, then you're more likely to survive and be part of the team, so to speak. So again, the argument or the public speaking gives that same sense of agitation. And lastly, recognizing a cancer diagnosis and all the unknowns that come with that give us naturally, because we perseverate, we want to plan, we want to know, we want to take action. But oftentimes in the cancer world, you can't know what's going to happen in the future, and you need to use your frontal lobe, the smarter, wiser part of your brain, to settle down the more primitive part of your brain and say, yes, it's true, but let's let go of the things I can't control, put my energy into things that I can control. So you're kind of using an override, using your wisdom there. And then I also think about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Why is it that some people get a cancer diagnosis and they kind of literally shaking as the months and years go by because they've had that kind of second trauma? And so I think about the early childhood, maybe a child that's abused in some sense or form, and so they have that severe kind of stress reaction, puts their mind body into the what do I need to do to survive mode, and the compensating kind of core beliefs that go with that, which is I have to maintain vigilance all the time, and so they're kind of on edge physically. And then a non-threatening trigger, yes, so cancer is threatening, but maybe they're getting through their treatment, they're recovering, but then even just the thought of having the first cancer diagnosis or the thought of having to go through treatment again primes that same kind of pathway that caused the original trauma. And so again, I'm just trying to point towards the truth so that we can recognize that we can actually recircuit and resettle down that kind of human psyche, human body. So we store that stress reaction and we can release it through, for instance, therapy, through techniques, through meditation, through doing the psychological work in the long term. So again, I'd say that partly, there's an opportunity with a cancer diagnosis to say, how can I heal myself from a bigger perspective through the kind of the stress pathways? Okay. If we allow ourselves to stay in that kind of high stress mode, that kind of shaking, rabbit or something like that for too long, too many months, too many years, it literally eats away at every system there. And I don't want to stress you out with the stress talk, but literally We need to settle ourselves down so that we allow the natural healing capacity within our body to do its work. Okay, so here's a kind of group exercise there, and if you're brave enough, if you could type in your responses as we go, even just like a word or a phrase. So what are your triggers? What are the situations in which you find yourself suddenly stressed, upset, flustered, agitated, overwhelmed? And just like one word or two in the type box there. Like you type in dealing with an angry person, or being late for an appointment, or going for a CAT scan, or getting CAT scan results. So type in something that points to your stressor. Okay, so then secondly, what happens physically within your body? What are the sensations? Rapid heartbeats, short of breath, tension, sweating, dry mouth, headache, backache, jaw pain, feeling you got to go to the bathroom, jitters. What's the physical sensation? How would you describe yourself emotionally? Right? Is it like a numbing out? Is it seeing red? You feel like you're going to cry? So again, what happens to your thinking? You become more concrete. Yet very, or you numb out. Most people can't think when they're feeling stressed. Or if you're typing down your thoughts throughout the day, you go back and read out this printout, how would you know you're stressed out? You know, you're calling people names, calling yourself names, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all different potential cues to say, oh, I'm having a stress reaction, I'm agitated right now. And so having that kind of mindfulness piece is the first step. And it could be any one of those cues there. Okay, so I want to teach you the first very simple technique. You're sitting in the doctor's waiting room, or you're sitting in the clinic office waiting to chat with your oncologist, and you're feeling kind of upset, agitated. You notice in some way or form that you're feeling stressed. Okay, so step one is press the pause button. So because usually you don't, 99% of the time you don't have to snatch the child from underneath the car. Press the pause button, and immediately it flips you up into a part of your brain that is going to observe. It's kind of observer consciousness. So you're using a different part of your brain, and then become very curious as to the physical sensations happening within my body. You're using your insula right now. What's that emotional experience? Without labeling, just become very curious. You can do this as I'm talking you through that. So you're very curious. You're going to take 4 slow breaths, slightly faster on the in-breath, slightly longer on the out-breath. As you practice this, you can count to 4 on the in-breath, 4, and count to 8 on the out-breath. As you're breathing out, you're actually priming the relaxation phase of your nervous system. Okay, so you practice the breathing, and then once you've primed the relaxation side, you're sending that signal up to your brain saying, I'm okay, then you can actually reassure yourself with wisdom and kindness. Say, yes, this is difficult, but I've been through difficult situations before. I can handle this. I'll take this one step at a time. I've got the resources here, right? You tap into that wise and kind part of yourself. Okay, so that's what you do in a sudden situation. And just to explain, we're doing a wellness challenge right now, which is essentially this idea of, like a New Year's resolution and using a kind of willpower, want power to help yourself. And I just want to point you to the part of the brain that's called the pause and plan response. And essentially, that kind of frontal lobe is kind of scanning your sensation thoughts to when there's a situation in which you might make a bad decision, essentially. Eat that cookie unnecessarily, or blurt out something at your partner or your boss that would be rude, and ultimately you don't want to do that. And so there's this kind of sensation like, oh, something's going wrong here. I'm conflicted. I want to tell that guy off, but I know I shouldn't. And so the inner conflict happens, and suddenly pause or plan circuitry light up, and it actually slows you down. Your heart rate goes down, blood pressure, breathing, and you're feeling calmer. So the brain is getting you to be calm without kind of putting you to sleep. And it's giving you a little time to reflect and try to make you give a good decision in the circumstance. So there's the circuitry within the brain that goes along with this technique of the breath. Okay, I call something called the stressometer, or the stressometer, which is essentially the kind of baseline state of your relaxation stress. So some of us are kind of agitated and kind of live in a high energy stress state. Some of us are much more mellow and it's kind of more calm and so on. And the point is that you can actually, by practice, lower your baseline levels, get yourself into a more peaceful state so you're there 95% of the time. And if you can do that, you won't get trapped up into the kind of high levels of stress here in the top dotted, dashed curved. Because typically most of us live in a kind of high gear, realizing that we're not taking the lower curve, which is awareness, settling ourselves down, stressful event happens, settle ourselves down, and we can kind of stay in a more peaceful state. The world is going to present the same external challenges to you, but you'll be in a different space, and you can still respond with wisdom and advocacy and however else you want to do that. Okay, so I want to thank Dr. Kelly McGonigal. I've been watching her YouTube talks. I've read her a couple of books now, and the one that has really changed my mind about stress, and feeling badly about all the teachings of stress over the years that stress is bad. But anyways, Upside of Stress is the name of the book there. And there's a few key ideas here. One is that we can see stressful situations and our stress reaction when we're feeling that sense of agitation and distress as actually helping us. And I want to describe, this is it comes in lots of different forms. A social stress test. Essentially, so for instance, these are Columbia business students. They were asked to give a 5-minute persuasive speech in front of some adjudicators. They were trying to look good for their business school mark. And it happens in different ways, but the adjudicators are actually mock interviewers, and so they either give the negative nonverbals like they yawn or look at their watch or cross their arms or totally deadpan face, and they just try to make the student feel iced down. And sometimes there's cameras and there's lights, et cetera, or the mock interviewers will stop the student and say, "Oh, that's a terrible example. Think of a better example than I. Keep on going with your presentation," or, "Oh, your body language is all wrong. Kind of stand up. So you need to look at it better." And so essentially, they're trying to stress them from a social perspective, or they might have them do math, like take 900 and subtract 7, keep giving the answer, and then mocking them. "You're not very good at math, are you?" and stuff like that. And so it's all these things that are done to try to make these guys feel really stressed as they're giving a presentation. Now, the students will say to a person that it is a stressful reaction, but the intervention there was half the students were told stress is bad for you beforehand, and half of them watched a video that basically said stress is enhancing. It helps you perform. When your heart is beating hard, it's getting blood to your body, you're breathing, you're getting more oxygen to your brain. The stress will give you a bit of an edge and help you. And so the students were randomized between those two sides, and then they were interviewed afterwards, and the students performed better, but they also said they were more confident, more determined, more excited when they saw their stress reaction is actually helping them. So it actually helped their performance, and they were feeling better about it. And they did a second thing. They measured a key chemical called DHEA, which is a precursor to testosterone from your neck down. Essentially, if you exercise, it gives your muscles a stress, you produce DHEA and testosterone, and the response is that the muscles get stronger and bigger, essentially. Within the brain itself, that same neurosteroid is released, and it helps you to learn during stressful situations. So it's almost as if your learning center stays online when you say, "Oh, this is stressful, but the stress is helping me." So by saying that stress is helping you, you actually function better, you think more clearly. The second hormone that I want to talk about during the stress reaction, you're suddenly flustered and so on, is actually oxytocin. And a lot of people will remember that as kind of the cuddle hormone, or it's released during breastfeeding, or helps the uterus contract during childbirth. And so it's a social hormone, but what people don't realize is actually released during stress. And the way I think about it, I think about the guys, the big strong guys that get the man cold or the flu, and they're just like, they're on their couch and they're feeling really lovey-dovey with their wives, and they like really want to be taken care of. And that's probably because oxytocin is going through their body during that stressful situation. So it drives that kind of pro-social, take care of me feeling. And if you allow that to happen, it actually has an anti-inflammatory effect on the heart, on the rest of the body, et cetera, et cetera. The takeaway from this one is when you're feeling stressed, either ask for help or give help. So you want to reach out and connect with others when you're feeling stressed. And that's the power of CCSN or other support groups, is that you're connecting with other people. There are other neurotransmitters that are released with stress. So your dopamine system allows your brain to think more clearly. You won't freeze. You have less fear. The serotonin system allows better perception and intuition. You understand better what is needed and the biggest impact for your actions. So these things can actually help you. The chemistry within your brain is helping you when you're feeling stressed. And even I'd say peak performance, like professional athletes or artists or surgeons or anybody who's at that kind of absolute peak of the game, when they're in that state, they're not feeling no stress, they're actually feeling stressed, but they also have that sense of energy, excitement, enthusiasm, confidence that is coming through. And so we can see our stress reaction is helping those performances. A very interesting study. So you're going into an exam, for instance, or some other circumstance, and you're feeling those kind of sense of jitters. And they've done studies where they say to half the people, say to yourself, I am calm, I'm relaxing myself, et cetera, et cetera. And then they also say to half of the people, they say, when you're feeling that, say to yourself, I'm excited. This is important. I'm feeling energized. And the people who say they're excited actually perform much better. So it's enhancing by actually embracing the stress reaction as something that's exciting for you. So there's the power of that. Or the easiest one is in your stressful situation, you can say to yourself, here's an opportunity to learn and grow. I can become stronger from this stressful situation. So same circumstance, different mindset allows better function within the brain. In the corporate world, this is from Alia Crum and gang. So we acknowledge our stressful reaction in like the mindfulness phase of noticing. We can actually welcome this to say, well, if I'm feeling stressed, therefore there's something that's important to me that's at stake, right? So I'm connected, and you can figure out why that matters and what my priority is in the circumstance. And then lastly, then you have that energy to actually take action. So those are some of the kind of techniques that they're teaching in the day-to-day. So just to repeat again, if you're in the bottom right-hand corner and really feeling super stressed, overwhelmed, you want to actually settle down your physiology so you can think more clearly and function better. If you're in a reasonable range and still functioning and feeling a bit anxious, just say your anxiety is helping your brain think. Just by saying that will bump you up to the upper curve up there. Okay, the next major skill, which is, we teach this skill called reframing or cognitive therapy or CBT or lots of different ways to say that at the weekend retreats, and it's probably the skill that people appreciate the most from the whole weekend. And it's a very, very powerful technique. And the idea is that our thoughts influence our emotions. So the most obvious example is people who are depressed typically have the thought, I'm no good, or it's no use. And that actually leads to depressive emotional state. And then that leads to kind of physical deterioration, mental deterioration, et cetera. So kind of a spiral down in that circumstance. Or it's no use, I can't get through this chemotherapy. It's also going to, the obvious one that just causes people to feel depressed and not to be able to help themselves through. And yes, there are circumstances where you want to stop chemo, but I'm talking about someone who's talking themselves out of it unnecessarily. So the idea then is that you can change those core beliefs, you can change your ideas, and then you'll feel better. You'll be more productive, your attitude will be better, et cetera, et cetera. And there's whole teaching, and go into our website and watch the whole talk, et cetera, et cetera. But it is New Year's, and I know people are trying to eat healthily, and so I want to take you through an absolute situation, but this is how this works. So Up top, you see situation, and that's just literally what's happened. That's just the truth of the circumstance without the judgment. And then oftentimes we put on a judgmental thought that adds extra unnecessary suffering to the situation, and that's what we're trying to reframe, not the intrinsic difficulty, but the extra unnecessary difficulty. Then you go through phase 2, is this thought helping me or harming me, how so? And ultimately phase 3, you're kind to yourself, you acknowledge difficulty, you look at the situation in a different way, and then you're encouraging to yourself. So that's the step 3, and it's just easy to teach by example. So you eat 3 pieces of cheesecake for dessert. You're on a diet now, and suddenly you find yourself on that 3rd piece of cheesecake, and you're going, oh my goodness, what happened there? And then you think to yourself, I can't believe I just did that. I'm such a loser. I'll never follow a healthy diet. It's no use. I should just give up now. Okay, so, interestingly, and I'm going to talk about this in the self-compassion, the best way that you can not relapse next time or do your best job or minimize your chance of relapse next time is to actually be compassionate, kind to yourself in that situation. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's the science that shows that. Okay, so let's take this exercise now. If you can recognize that you're thinking that way, you can actually start to reframe this. And so you go into the second column, what emotions follow this way of thinking? And people can type in an answer if they want in their little chat box there. Typically, frustrated, angry at yourself, et cetera, you're having kind of a stress reaction. It's not helpful, I'm going to argue, to have this thought, I'm such a loser. That's not really helpful. I should just give up. Well, that's not helpful. And how is it exaggerated? Which is, now you're talking from a logical perspective, how is your thinking wrong? I'm such a loser. A loser is kind of like a label that captures 100% of the character, 100% of the time I'm a loser. So that's an exaggeration. I'll never follow a healthy diet. That sounds like a kind of prediction in the future. You could quite possibly do that. It's no use. Well, it actually is use. You have been healthy to date. I should just give up. A should statement is also a prime to say that there's an exaggerated thinking. Okay, so then if you're your best friend and you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your best friend who's just had a lapse in their diet, what would you say to them? And therefore, what would you say to yourself? Say, this is frustrating and disappointing, but relapses are expected. No one is perfect, and I can learn from this and do better next time. So again, it's the quality of that, of what you say, and acknowledging the emotions and then being positive. You can learn from it and do better next time. So there's an example from the just on the day-to-day healthy eating world. I see this woman once per month. She's a lovely lady. She gives to everybody else. She lives by herself. She's in the midst of chemo. She's tired. She needs a ride. And then she finds herself thinking this: I hate asking for help. I'm the free one that takes care of everybody else. I can't bear needing their help. I'll handle this myself. Right? So she's kind of, her ego is identified in being the giver. And so she's creating, in the second column, she's creating the frustrations and stress reaction. It's not helping her to kind of distance herself this way, and it's exaggerating. I hate is an exaggeration. When she's swearing could be the prime to say that something's wrong. I can't bear needing your help. Well, she's going to have a stroke if she gets a ride from somebody. So really, a lot of exaggeration there. And then, interestingly, I use this lady's thinking, her kind of core beliefs, to help her reframe this. And essentially what I say to her is, you're going to give other people a real gift if you allow them to give you a ride to the cancer center. So that's the kind of spiritual lesson of giving and receiving. And that can help her through that. Interesting one. They say you're supposed to stay positive, but I feel awful, angry, helpless, and feel despair. I'm afraid I'm making it worse. So probably the core belief there is that you have to be positive all the time. And it's just not reasonable and not expected. And so therefore it's an exaggeration. And so the reframe in the right column comes out is, it's natural to have strong and negative feelings. I'm learning to comfort myself and ask for reassurance. I can work with my state of mind, and that helps. And I like feeling like, yeah, it can get better. I can do better tomorrow. I'll feel better tomorrow. I'll take care of myself now. Okay, so those are all examples of reframes that's in a sense based on wisdom, but also based in self-compassion. And this is very, very powerful stuff. And so I read this wonderful book, Self-Compassion. You can go to selfcompassion.org actually. And it's really the proof that being compassionate to ourselves is actually the most effective way to be in the world. And we want to differentiate that from being self-pity or self-indulgence. Like people say, well, if I'm not harsh on myself, I have no motivation. Well, it's just not true. And actually, the data is quite clear that being self-compassionate is associated with many, many positive attributes. So people feel better psychologically, they have more happiness in their lives, they're healthier, they take care of themselves, they're more resilient, their partners rate them as more caring and giving and understanding, et cetera, et cetera. So the truth is, through an intervention, by teaching yourself this, you actually decrease depression, anxiety, stress levels, et cetera, et cetera. So by changing core beliefs and how you interact with yourself intrapsychically, you can actually have a tremendous benefit in your health. And I'm just going to take you through some of the kind of self-compassion slides so you get a feel for what this is about. So self-compassion.org is the website. Some fantastic, we even have like audio files and things, meditations you can use. So the idea is that we give ourselves the same kindness and care that we give to a good friend, right? So some of the things that we say to ourselves, we didn't even say to our worst enemy. We're so harsh at times. But essentially, you notice that you're suffering, that, geez, I'm feeling really bad in the circumstance. You're having that feeling of a kind of heartful, kind response, wanting this person to feel better. And then the last one is that we all go through difficult experiences. This is a shared human experience, and we're not isolated in that. And so to have that feeling connects us. It's not the same as self-judgment, so it's about care and understanding. And so we can actively psychologically, so through how we think, and actually through a physical, in fact, why don't we do that right now? Just take the 30 seconds it's going to take here, just to put both hands over the center of the chest, just over the kind of the heart level. If the guys are listening, they can use a fist over the center of the chest, but just have the feeling of kind of hands on heart, soothing, feeling that sense of touch, that sense of peace, and allowing yourself to enjoy that moment of self-soothing, self-care. It's a wonderful symbol, just that, and do it in the mornings. And then the desire to relieve suffering. So, and suffering could be kind of any kind of psychological distress or discomfort. It doesn't have to be like Jesus on the cross type of suffering. It's that kind of sense of distress. So common humanity, so recognizing that we're all going to have difficult experiences, that cancer diagnoses are part of the human experience, and that there are thousands and millions of other people that are going through difficult experiences well there, and that life is imperfect, that things aren't going to necessarily go the way that we want them to. So probably the major core belief that people struggle with is, quotes, life should not be this way, end quotes. And if you can work with that and reframe that to say, I have what I have in this very moment, it's very powerful. Okay, so the idea is that our thoughts can kind of create these core beliefs and ongoing distress, where simply being with the painful feelings without judging has a power. And as you do that, you're actually, again, connecting the frontal lobe to those other parts within your brain itself. Yeah, and this is the argument is, if I'm not harsher on myself, I'm just going to lapse in my diet or whatever else. I'm not going to make any headway. Well, it's simply not true. If you're too harsh on yourself, as an inner critic, you're creating that stress reaction, and then you actually fear failure more and less likely to persist there. And so When we're self-compassionate, we take more responsibility. And the idea is like, self-compassion, not like being wimpy or overindulgent. Like if a mother to a child, the mother's not going to just let the child eat ice cream all day long. That would not be compassionate. The self-compassionate person recognizes that there's a balance, that you need to take care of yourself and you need to use discipline. So it's not all about mushy-gushy letting yourself get away with things. You actually want to use it in a kind of more proactive sense. Okay, so the last skill that I want to point to is called taking in the good. And it's very powerful. And I'm actually going to read you a quick quote from more than 100 years ago. Henry Thoreau wrote this. He said, "As a single footstep will not make a path in the earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kinds of thoughts we want to dominate our lives." And that's essentially it. As you practice being in the states of mind that you want to practice, then your brain will get better and better at doing that. And so that's taking in the good. And I just want to say, so it's called self-directed neuroplasticity. Change your mind. Psyche has an influence on the physical structure of the brain. The physical structure then has an influence on what you think, your psyche. And so as you practice, the neurons get stronger and stronger. Those pathways fire together. And the idea is that we can grow the inner strengths by having the mental states. You want more confidence, more peace, then you practice that, and ultimately you'll turn into a trait with time. But in order for that to happen, for the brain to actually put that down, you actually have to have the experience and stay with the experience long enough for the brain to make that happen for yourself. So you can either have the experience or visualize the experience there. Just to give you an idea of the different strengths that you might think about, I'll show you this list again, but I just want to give you an impression of strength can be more than just courage. It can be a whole bunch of different things. Could be peace, could be love, could be connection, different virtues. So just keep this in mind as I talk about strength itself. And so we're going to do an exercise together shortly of what inner strength you want to develop, or what is the antidote to the state that you don't want to have. And so our inner strengths are based on brain structure. So the green, positive stuff, and the red is the negative states of mind. And the problem is that the brain has a negativity bias, so that we don't want to make mistakes from the negative perspectives. And so the negative, don't want to miss seeing a lion that's coming around the corner, or from behind the bush type thing. So we want to err on the side of negativity in order to stay alive. And so we have a preferential system of worrying, keeping those negative states alive. So it's Teflon for the good and Velcro for the bad. And so what we want to do is use a technique to kind of balance the positive side there. And essentially, the teaching from this is that in order to have this happen in your life, you have to hold the positive state of mind for at least 15 to 20 seconds. So when you're walking outside and seeing that wonderful snowstorm or sunset or whatever it is that touches your heart at that point, actually stay with that sense of gratitude and peace. It's wonderful to be alive just now for 15 or 20 seconds to allow the circuitry to go down. And like practicing the gratitude journal, your brain will get better and better at actually experiencing that state of mind. If you just say, oh, well, that's a wonderful sunset, boom, and you're on to the next thing, then you've lost the opportunity to change the circuitry within your brain. So it takes time, 5 to 6 times for 15 to 20 seconds every day of having those experiences will change your brain even over 3 or 4 weeks. So there's a negativity bias, and by practicing taking in the good, you open your brain to having those positive experiences. Okay, from the list here, I want you to choose one positive strength, something that you want more of. From that long list, there's something that you want to grow within your brain. All right, so as you think about that, I want you to close your eyes and to remember the last time that you had that state. And I want you to now begin to experience what it's like to be in that state. So what was happening in your life? What did you see? Where were you? What was the physical environment? How did your body feel? What did you hear? What was the energy in the situation? Okay, so hold that feeling. What were the sounds? What were the feelings? What was said, or what was the silence like? And allow yourself to really feel and be in that situation. Right? So you're going to really, now as you experience it, allow yourself to feel it right now and generate that sense of whatever it is in your body, how you felt within yourself. And imagine now that you're actually absorbing that into your psyche, into your heart, like placing a beautiful jewel and a treasure trove within your heart itself. That you're giving yourself that experience that you'll be able to garner and appreciate from now on. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for doing that. And so that finishes off the kind of exercise of taking in the good. A short practice like that is actually setting up the circuitry so you can become happier in the long term. Okay, so that finishes off the classic part of this. Just to say that we have a wellness challenge on right now. We're at week 2, and so people can join in by visiting the wellnesschallenge.org. We're at this, finished the second podcast out of 9. We're actually about to talk about self-compassion this weekend. And ultimately, this is about you being happier and healthier by teaching you a whole series of lectures and materials and home practices to help you feel better. And I want to just finish with really acknowledging Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. Jackie Manthorn and team are just doing wonderful, wonderful work. We'll leave the contact information up here on this slide, but perhaps we can finish off with the actual recording itself and just take questions now.